My daughter-in-law coldly told me I wasn't invited to my own grandson's christening celebration at the lakeside resort. We only have enough room for immediate family, Grandpa. You understand. My son just shrugged and said, Dad, maybe sit this one out. Lisa needs space from you. I just nodded and said, Of course. Have a wonderful weekend. When they pulled up to the resort in Muskoka, 2 weeks later, I was already standing in the lobby, but not as a guest, begging for a room, as the owner who had just tripled their bill. Before I continue, please hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments which province or country you're listening from. Now, let me tell you how a quiet 67-year-old retired contractor from Hamilton, Ontario, taught his family what respect really costs. The invitation came on a Tuesday afternoon in late September, delivered by my son Matthew over a cup of Tim Hortons coffee I had brewed myself. He sat across from me in the kitchen my late wife Eleanor had designed back in 1994, the one with the oak cabinets she had refinished by hand 3 summers before the ovarian cancer took her. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He never could when he was about to disappoint me. Dad, we're planning something for little Noah's baptism celebration. A weekend up at Silver Pines Resort in Muskoka. The Fletchers are coming, obviously, Lisa's whole side, and Pastor Donnelly is doing a private blessing by the lake on Sunday morning. I nodded slowly, stirring my coffee with the same spoon Eleanor had bought at a flea market in Kitchener 30 years ago. Sounds lovely, son. When should I be ready? I can drive up Friday afternoon if that helps with the setup. Matthew cleared his throat, shifted in his chair. I watched him become 8 years old again for just a moment, the boy who broke a window with a baseball and couldn't find the words to tell me. Except now he was 36, wearing a $500 Eddie Bauer jacket I had bought him last Christmas, and what he was about to break was something far more fragile than glass. Dad, the thing is, Lisa's been under a lot of stress. The baby, work, her mother's been sick. She asked if maybe this time it could just be, immediate family. I am immediate family, Matthew. I'm Noah's grandfather. Right, of course, but Lisa means her parents, her sister. The Fletcher side. Her mother wants to do some traditional Newfoundland blessing thing, and she thinks having too many voices will dilute the intention. Her words, not mine. I set my spoon down carefully on the saucer. Outside, a cardinal landed on the bird feeder Eleanor had installed, and I watched it peck at the seeds while I swallowed whatever fatherly instinct was trying to speak. My kitchen clock ticked once, twice, 3 times. And you're comfortable with this arrangement? Matthew shrugged. The same shrug he used when Lisa decided they wouldn't come for Thanksgiving last year. The same shrug he used when they moved Noah's first birthday from our backyard to her parents' cottage with 48 hours' notice. The same shrug that had been slowly dismantling our relationship, one small surrender at a time. Dad, she just needs some space from you right now. You can be, a lot. The opinions, the advice about how we raised Noah, the comments about money. It wears her down. The comments about money. That was rich. I had paid $17,000 toward their wedding at the Royal York in Toronto 3 years ago. I had covered the down payment on their townhouse in Burlington, $22,000 I pulled from my retirement savings. I had bought them a 2022 Honda Pilot when Lisa announced she wouldn't be seen driving my old Subaru to Mommy and Me classes. Every time I wrote a check, Matthew would hug me and say, Dad, you're a legend. We'll pay you back. And every time, the repayment conversation simply evaporated like steam off a Tim's coffee in February. All right, Matthew, I said, because what else does a father say? You boys enjoy your weekend. Give Noah a kiss from his grandpa. He stood up so fast his chair nearly tipped over. Relief flooded his face, and for a moment I hated him for it. He grabbed his keys, mumbled something about having to pick up Lisa from her yoga class in Oakville, and was out the door in under 90 seconds. His coffee sat untouched, steaming on the placemat Eleanor had crocheted. I poured it down the drain. That night, I sat in my study, the one room in the house Lisa had once described as smelling like old men and mildew, and I stared at the framed photo on my desk. Noah, 6 months old, wearing the knit hat I had brought back from a trip to Prince Edward Island. His tiny hand was wrapped around my thumb, and his gummy smile was aimed right at me. His grandfather. The man whose presence would dilute his blessing. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer, Walter Thornberry. Walter and I had been friends since our sons played pee-wee hockey together in 1995. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice gravelly with evening whiskey. "Frank, you all right? It's nearly 9. Walter, I need you to pull together everything on Silver Pines. The complete package. Ownership records, operating numbers, current occupancy, the whole file." A long silence. I heard ice clink in his tumbler. "Frank, are you serious?" "I'm very serious. And Walter, I need it fast. We're buying before the end of October." What Walter knew, and what my son Matthew had never bothered to find out, was that I had not spent the last 30 years just pouring asphalt and pulling permits. After Eleanor died in 2004, I had taken the life insurance money, the $220,000 that felt like blood money in my hands, and I had invested it quietly. First a small commercial lot on Barton Street that I flipped in 18 months. Then a strip of rental units in Stony Creek. Then a vacation property in Collingwood that I leased to a ski rental company. Then another, and another. By 2019, I had incorporated a numbered company, 2847193 Ontario Limited, that held 4 hospitality properties across southern Ontario and 1 small inn on the shores of Lake Huron. My net worth, last time Walter ran the numbers, hovered somewhere north of 4.6 million Canadian. Not enough to retire in Monaco, but enough to make my son's mortgage look like pocket change. Matthew had never asked. Lisa had certainly never asked. And I had never volunteered, because Eleanor and I had always believed that money changes how your children see you, and I wanted to be seen as their father, not their bank. Turns out, they had already stopped seeing me as anything at all. The next morning I drove up Highway 400, coffee in the cup holder, a legal pad on the passenger seat. Silver Pines Resort sat on a 300-acre lot on the west shore of Lake Joseph, tucked between 2 Canadian Shield outcroppings, 48 rooms, a main lodge, 12 lakefront cottages, a dining hall, a chapel pavilion for weddings and baptisms, and a marina that held 20 slips. It had been owned for 11 years by a man named Gordon Blackwood, a former Bay Street executive who had sunk his retirement into turning it into an upscale getaway for wealthy families from the GTA. 2 of the last 3 summers had been smoky and short due to wildfire seasons, and Gordon was reportedly looking to sell quietly to avoid spooking his staff. I met him on a Friday morning in a little office behind the main lodge that smelled like cedar and pipe tobacco. Gordon was my age, 70 maybe, with the weathered hands of a man who had finally started doing actual work in his retirement. He poured me a coffee, served with a splash of real cream from a local dairy in Bracebridge, and we talked for 3 hours. "How fast can you close, Frank?" he asked, once I had laid out my financial documents. "Before October 31st. I need possession by November 1st at the absolute latest." He whistled. "That's aggressive. Why the rush?" "Family matter, Gordon. Nothing that will affect the property's reputation. I need it for a weekend in early November, that's all." He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded the way old Canadian men nod, the way our fathers taught us. Once, slow, final. 3.4 million. Cash. No contingencies beyond standard title search. You waive inspection. 3.1, I countered. I'm paying cash in 21 days. You get to finalize by Halloween and have it off your books before the snow flies. Gordon smiled for the first time. 3.2. And I keep the Boston Whaler at the marina. It was my son's. I extended my hand. Deal. We closed on October 29th. Walter handled the paperwork with a surgeon's precision. 2847193. Ontario Limited became the new registered owner of Silver Pines Resort. I had 3 weeks to prepare. The first thing I did was hire a new general manager, or rather promote the existing one. Her name was Megan Lachance, a 41-year-old from Sudbury who had been Gordon's right hand for 6 years. She was sharp, organized, and completely unsentimental. When I flew up for our first meeting, I laid out 3 scenarios, explained the family situation without embellishment, and asked her straight out if she was willing to execute exactly what I requested, provided nothing was illegal or harmful to other guests. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked only one question. "Mr. Kovalenko, is any of what you're asking me to do going to hurt that baby?" "Megan, on my wife's grave, Noah will be the only person on that property who is treated exactly according to his station. That child will have the best room, the best food, the most attentive care. The rest is about his parents." She nodded once. Slow. Final. "Then I'll run it exactly as you've outlined, sir." The Fletcher weekend was booked for November 14th through the 17th. Lisa had reserved 6 of our 12 lakefront cottages, the best ones, the Loon Cottage for herself and Matthew and Noah, the Trillium and Maple Leaf for her parents and sister's family, 2 more for aunts and uncles and the pastor, and 1 for the photographer she had hired for the occasion. Total original booking, 18 guests, $5,400. I had Megan pull the reservation and quietly restructure it. Under the new ownership policy, effective November 1st, all guests were being moved from cottages to the main lodge rooms for the duration of winterization maintenance on the cottage plumbing. Entirely legal. Entirely documented. The Loon Cottage would remain available, reserved for a single VIP guest whose identity would remain confidential until arrival. Lisa's 6 cottages became 6 standard main lodge rooms, 2 of them overlooking the parking lot where the snowplow would be running intermittently through the weekend. The rates adjusted to reflect new ownership pricing, an increase of approximately 60% to align with our repositioned luxury market. Guests were notified by email 72 hours before arrival, exactly within the legal window for Ontario tourism regulations. I flew up to the lodge on Wednesday the 12th, 2 days before the family would arrive. I stayed in the small staff apartment above the kitchen, the same modest quarters Gordon had used when he wanted to avoid the guests. I walked the property with Megan every morning, reviewing operational details, meeting the cooks, meeting the housekeeping team, learning every face of every person who worked in what was now my hotel. On Wednesday evening, my cell phone rang. It was my son. "Dad, we've got a situation with the resort." "Oh? Is everything all right, son?" "No, everything is not all right. Lisa just got an email from Silver Pine saying they moved our cottage reservations. Now we're stuck in some lodge rooms, and the prices went up over $2,000. Lisa is losing her mind." I made my voice concerned, fatherly. "That sounds like a real mess, Matthew. Did they give a reason?" "Some nonsense about new ownership and winter maintenance." "Dad, can you believe this? We booked in August. We had confirmations. What does Lisa want to do?" A pause. I could hear Lisa in the background, her voice shrill and clipped, the voice she used when a barista put oat milk instead of almond. "She wants to cancel and find somewhere else, but Pastor Donnelly has already committed, and the Fletchers are flying in from Halifax. There's nowhere else up there that can take 18 people with 2 days' notice. We're stuck." "That's a real shame. I hope the weekend still goes well." "Yeah. Thanks, Dad." He hung up without asking how I was doing. Friday morning, I sat in the main lodge office with a clear view of the reception desk through the 2-way glass Gordon had installed years ago for training purposes. Megan was at the front counter. Our head of hospitality, a young man from New Brunswick named Dennis, was at her side. 2 security staff were positioned at the entrance, not threatening, just present, the way good hotel security always should be. At 11:47 a.m., the first vehicle arrived. A black Mercedes SUV carrying Lisa's parents, Harold and Margaret Fletcher. Harold had been a regional VP at Scotiabank before retiring, and he wore his retirement like a second career, golfing in Florida 6 months a year and holding court at family dinners about the state of the economy. Margaret followed behind him into the lobby, her winter coat of full-length camel wool that probably cost more than my first car. They checked in without incident, though Harold's eyebrows climbed when he saw the final room rate. Margaret made a small sound of disapproval but said nothing. Megan was polite, efficient, professional. They were handed keys to room 214, a standard main lodge room with a view of the woodpile. At 12:31, Matthew's Honda Pilot pulled up. I watched from the office as my son climbed out, then walked around to open the door for Lisa, who emerged looking like she had been chewing on lemons the entire drive up from Burlington. Matthew carried the car seat with Noah inside. My grandson was bundled in a little snowsuit, his cheeks pink, his eyes wide and curious at the snow beginning to fall in big, lazy flakes. Lisa marched into the lobby ahead of Matthew, her boots clicking on the slate floor. She had that specific posture I had come to recognize over 3 years of marriage to my son, shoulders back, chin up, prepared for battle with anyone in a service industry uniform. "Fletcher reservation?" Actually, it's under Kovalenko. Lisa Kovalenko. Megan smiled pleasantly. Of course, Mrs. Kovalenko. Welcome to Silver Pines. I have your rooms ready. Rooms, Lisa repeated flatly. We booked cottages. Yes, ma'am. And I see our ownership team sent an email on November 11th explaining the winterization of our cottage units. We've placed you in our comfort-level main lodge rooms for the weekend. The email was outrageous. We want to speak to the owner. The owner isn't taking meetings today, ma'am. But Mr. Kovalenko, is there a family connection? I notice you share a surname with... What? No. I mean, my husband's last name is Kovalenko. It's a common Ukrainian name. Megan's expression did not flicker. She was magnificent. Understood, ma'am. Your rooms are 218, 219, 220, and 221. Here are the key cards. Breakfast is from 7 to 10, and the chapel pavilion is reserved for your private service Sunday morning at 10 a.m. And what about the Loon Cottage? That's the one I specifically requested for my family. The Loon Cottage is currently reserved for another guest. I apologize for the inconvenience. Who's staying in it? We've been planning this for months. Megan smiled with the patience of a kindergarten teacher. I'm not at liberty to disclose other guests' information, Mrs. Kovalenko. Is there anything else I can help you with? Lisa turned to Matthew, and the look she gave him was the same look I had watched her use to demand he ask me for money for their kitchen renovation. A look that said, fix this, or answer for it later. My son opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. He had no words. He never did when she looked at him like that. They took the keys. They gathered their luggage. And Matthew carried Noah's car seat up the stairs to room 218, a room with a view of the parking lot and the snowplow staging area. I watched from the office window as Lisa's shoulders grew more and more rigid with every step. The rest of the Fletcher clan trickled in over the next 3 hours. Lisa's sister Danielle and her husband Trent, her brother Cameron from Calgary, 2 aunts, an uncle, 3 cousins, and Pastor Donnelly, who arrived in a rental car from Pearson with a carry-on bag and a Bible tucked under his arm. 18 guests, exactly as booked. Every single one of them checked into main lodge rooms. Every single one of them paid the new rates. Every single one of them began to understand, slowly, that the weekend they had envisioned, the one with private lakefront cottages and morning fog on the water and champagne toasts on their own private deck, was not going to be the weekend they got. I stayed out of sight until dinner. At 6:45 p.m., I walked down from the staff apartment, dressed in a simple charcoal sweater and a pair of dark slacks, and I strolled through the main lodge as casually as any owner might, chatting with the bartender, nodding to Dennis, examining a painting of a loon in flight on the north wall. Megan had set the dining room so that my path would bring me directly past the long family table, where the Fletchers and my son and my daughter-in-law were just being served their first course. Lisa saw me first. Her fork froze halfway to her mouth. Matthew beside her had his back to me, leaning down to murmur something to Noah in his high chair. Harold Fletcher was in the middle of a monologue about the price of maple syrup and did not notice the change in the table's energy until his wife tugged his sleeve. Matthew turned. His face cycled through 3 complete emotions in under 2 seconds. Confusion, disbelief, horror. Dad? I smiled the mild smile of a man who has just noticed an acquaintance at the post office. Matthew. Son, what a surprise. I didn't realize your family weekend was here. Lisa's voice cut through the room like a blade. Are you stalking us? Matt, is your father stalking us? Heads turned at nearby tables. A couple celebrating their 40th anniversary at table 6 paused mid-conversation. A group of 4 women on a girls' weekend from Toronto looked over with the kind of focused attention Canadian women reserve for a developing situation. I kept my voice calm, unhurried. Lisa, I'd hardly stalk my own family at a resort I had no idea you had chosen. What a coincidence. This is not a coincidence. You always do this. You always have to insert yourself. Actually, dear, I'm here on business. I own the place. Silence. Harold Fletcher choked on his wine. Margaret's hand went to her throat. Danielle, Lisa's sister, said, I'm sorry, what? in a voice that was more curiosity than confrontation. Matthew simply stared. Noah, oblivious, banged his tiny spoon against his high chair tray and laughed. "I'm sorry," Lisa said slowly. "You own what, exactly?" "Silver Pines Resort. My numbered company closed on the purchase on October 29th. I've been the owner for about 16 days now. I was actually up here handling some operational matters this weekend when I saw the Kovalenko reservation in our system. Quite the coincidence." Matthew finally found his voice. It came out as a croak. "Dad, you bought a resort in Muskoka. You..." "Yes, son. I've actually owned several properties for quite a few years now. Your mother and I used to talk about hospitality. She always loved it up here. I thought it would be a fitting tribute." Margaret Fletcher recovered first. She had 60 years of dinner party diplomacy in her bones, and she deployed every ounce of it. "Well, Frank, what a wonderful surprise. You must be so proud." "Matthew, darling, why didn't you tell us your father was in hospitality?" "Because," Matthew said slowly, "eyes on me? I didn't know." Lisa's face had gone through several colors, settling on a blotchy pink. The room rate increases, the cottage reassignment. "This is you. You did this." "I implemented new ownership policies, yes. Every rate is legal. Every notice was issued within regulatory timelines. You were, of course, free to cancel. The cancellation penalty was only 15%. "This is disgusting," she hissed. "This is absolutely disgusting behavior from a grandfather." "Matthew, say something." My son looked at me, then looked at his wife, then looked at his son, who was reaching chubby hands toward a dinner roll. I watched him try to find the words that would salvage anything, and I watched him fail. "Dad, can we talk? Privately?" "Of course, son. After you finish your dinner, I'll be in the lounge. Take your time, enjoy the meal. It's actually quite good. I hired a new sous chef from Montreal last week." I walked out of the dining room with the calm, measured pace of a man who owned the floor beneath his feet. Matthew found me 40 minutes later in the lounge, sitting by the fireplace with a glass of Macallan. He sat down heavily in the leather chair across from me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. "Dad, why? Why did I buy the resort? Or why did I let you walk into it blind?" "Both." I took a slow sip of my whiskey. Outside, the snow was coming down harder now, thick and silent against the big picture windows. "Matthew, when your mother died, I was 47 years old. I had a son in his first year of university and a business I didn't know how to run alone. I could have fallen apart. Instead, I worked. I worked in ways you never saw, because I didn't want you to grow up feeling like you had to carry your old man's grief or his success. I built something, quietly, year after year, and I kept it quiet because I watched what money does to families. I watched my own brother turn on our father over a boat worth $6,000. I didn't want that for us." He was staring at the fire now, unable to look at me. "When you brought Lisa home, I welcomed her. When you got married, I paid. When you bought the house, I paid. When Noah was born, I was in that hospital for 11 hours waiting for my grandson to arrive, and your wife didn't come out of the room to see me. I left a stuffed bear on the nurse's station with a note, and I drove home. Alone. I told myself she was overwhelmed. I made excuses. Dad, Lisa was tired. Matthew, I'm going to say this exactly once, and then we will be done discussing it. Your wife has spent 3 years excluding me from my own family, and you have allowed it. You told me on Tuesday that my presence at my grandson's baptism would be too much. And I said okay, because I have said okay for 3 years. But here is the thing, son. A man can say okay 100 times. He can say okay until his voice is hoarse. And one day, he will say no. And when he says no, the family that spent 3 years treating him like furniture will have no idea that the furniture has been holding up the entire house. He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. What do you want, Dad? Just tell me what you want. I want nothing, Matthew. Not anymore. I want to host your family's weekend exactly as contracted. I want you to pay your bill when you check out Sunday. And I want you to go home and think about what kind of father you have been willing to be, and what kind of son you have been willing to stop being. And Noah? Noah is my grandson. He will always be my grandson. What happens between his parents and me has nothing to do with the love I have for that boy. But understand this clearly. If you and Lisa continue on the path you have chosen, you will raise that child believing I am a villain, and one day he will be old enough to ask questions. And one day, I will answer them." Matthew wiped his eyes roughly with the back of his hand. He looked for the first time in years like my son, the real one, the one before Lisa, the one who used to come out to job sites with me and carry my measuring tape and ask questions about trusses. "I didn't know you built all this. You never asked." He nodded slowly. Then he stood up. And then, to my surprise, he walked around the low table and he hugged me. An awkward, stiff, fragile hug. The hug of a grown man who had forgotten how to embrace his father. I hugged him back. I would not forgive him that weekend. Forgiveness, I had learned, is earned, not granted. But the door was not closed. Not yet. The rest of the weekend unfolded in a kind of uneasy quiet. Lisa refused to speak to me. She spent most of Saturday in her room with Noah, emerging only for meals, which she ate with a face like a cold front moving across the prairies. Harold Fletcher, sensing that the political landscape had shifted, became suddenly attentive toward me, asking about my properties, my investment philosophy, complimenting the chef. I received his attention with the polite distance of a man who has seen which way the wind blows and does not need to be impressed. On Sunday morning, Pastor Donnelly performed the blessing for Noah in the chapel pavilion, with the lake frozen and glowing white beyond the tall windows. I stood at the back. I had not been invited to participate, and I did not ask. When the pastor anointed Noah's forehead, my grandson laughed, a bright, bubbling laugh that filled the whole pavilion, and I felt my throat close up in a way it had not since Eleanor's funeral. Matthew caught my eye across the room. He nodded. Just once. I nodded back. They checked out at 11 a.m. Monday. The final bill came to $11,400, billed in full to Lisa's MasterCard. She signed the slip without a word. Matthew carried Noah out to the pilot. He paused at the door, turned back, and raised a hand in a small wave. I waved back. 3 weeks later, on a gray December afternoon, Matthew called. He asked if he could come over. He came alone. No Lisa. He sat in Eleanor's kitchen with a Tim Hortons coffee, and he told me that he and Lisa were going to counseling, that she had given him an ultimatum, that he had given her one back. He did not know what would happen. He did not know if his marriage would survive. But he knew, he said, that he had lost himself somewhere, and that weekend at Silver Pines had been the first time in years he had seen himself clearly in a mirror. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. I don't expect you to forgive me today. I don't even expect it next year. I just wanted you to know I see it now." I poured him another coffee. We sat in the kitchen Eleanor had designed, and I told him about his mother, stories he had never heard, the way she had haggled down a cabinet maker in Kitchener in 1994, the way she had cried when she finally got the kitchen exactly right. He stayed for 3 hours. When he left, he hugged me again at the door. This time, it wasn't stiff. This time, it was a son's hug. Noah will be 2 years old this April. Matthew brings him to visit every other Sunday. Lisa has not been back. She and Matthew are still together, still in counseling, and I do not know what their future holds. But here is what I know. I know that a quiet man with a dated jacket and a Tim's coffee can build a life his children never bothered to see. I know that respect, once refused, does not have to be begged for. It can be commanded, if you are willing to be honest about what you have and what you are no longer willing to give. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button, subscribe to Ruthless Vengeance for more, and tell me in the comments, would you have done the same, or would you have walked away and never looked back? Click the video on your screen now for the next story.